The fall of Honda in MotoGP has been well documented. Now, if you're new to MotoGP, you might think Honda have always been like this in the struggles of the rebuilding process, but I'm here to tell you it's not always been like that, and how the biggest brand in our sport is rising again. And yeah, if you think back to maybe 3 years ago, 2022, they were bottom of the constructors. 2023, they were bottom of the constructors. 2024 was the newest low for Honda that I can remember in my time watching MotoGP. And they scored 75 points in the constructors. They were Both teams were bottom of the teams championship. That would be an LCR Honda and the factory Repsol Honda team, as it was known as then. They lost their sponsorship with Repsol in at the end of 2024, and this then leads to a rebuilding process with the help of MotoGP's concession based system. They've been allowed to accelerate their development, and 2025 has seen changes. We've seen new faces with test riders, technical bosses, and we've seen the resurgence of the best and biggest brand in the sport. We've seen Johan Zarco win at his home Grand Prix, yes, albeit in the wet, but take a victory for Honda. We've seen the next race after him take a podium in the dry at Silverstone. And then we've seen steady progress from the bike. We've seen changes with chassis, swing arms, and it all of a sudden makes Honda accelerate up to the potentially the third best bike on the grid at the moment. They've took podiums with Joan Mir in the flyaways, both in Japan and Sepang. We've seen the bike look completely different to how it looked even a year ago in terms of the handling, the comments from the riders, just progress. I think this is a key indicator for the future, but it's all about looking back. Of course, when they lost their greatest rider, Marc Marquez, at the end of 2023, since you could probably say 2020 from his injury, the project just hasn't looked steady. It was waiting for Mark to come back. They had test riders in there. Mark was missing key tests when he had diplopia, for example, at the end of 2021. And when he got back at the start of 2022, there was a lot of feedback from the different riders at the time, and the bike was a mess, essentially. It was not what everyone could universally agree on. Some riders like riding a different chassis, some riders like riding this. It created a problem, and the problem being the engine mainly, where it was either too aggressive, it wasn't powerful enough, and it was creating havoc with tire wear. They weren't able to dial it down. And I think for 2023, of course, it's the highlighted season where Marc Marquez leaves and he tries the bike at the 2023 Misano test. At the time, I remember it so clearly. He said there was no difference really with the bike, and then a few weeks later he leaves Honda. They're in a real difficult spot then. They have to scramble to find a rider. They find Luca Marini, who is to replace Marc Marquez. Joan Mir's in the team, the 2020 MotoGP World Champion. He suffered a really tough 2023, similar to Marquez, where I think in that season they totaled up 52 crashes between them, which is just, I mean, it's insane. And considering the amount of races that Marquez missed because of injury, Mir missed a few races because of injury too, it was a real low for Honda. 2024, I think, even got lower, but it needed to hit rock bottom for it to go up. And they, of course, signed Luca Marini. They got new technical bosses involved. They've got Romano Albiciano from Aprilia. They lost sponsorship with Repsol, of course, was a key backer, but they used the concessions to their benefit. They brought in Elisa Spargaro, who goes without saying, the work he did with Aprilia was absolutely phenomenal in turning that project from a back of the grid bike to a winning bike. Taka Nakagami as well, moving out of his full-time riding role to retiring as a test rider. It just seemed that the steps were in the right place. You had the Japanese communication with Nakagami to get through to the engineers. You had at least Espargaro willing to put in the hard yards and test and test and test and make sure he gets the bike rider friendly. And we've seen that from testing instantly last year. I mean, it wasn't the flashy 5/10th bridge. It was a 10th here, a 10th there. And then you get to the start of the season where it actually wasn't the factory team that was doing all the heavy lifting. It was Johann Zarco. And his impressive performances right from the start of the year into, like I say, the Grand Prix win at France in the second place at Silverstone, it breathed all the confidence back into Honda as a project. Probably surprising how much that actually gained in the short time, because if you look at it from the other side, Yamaha, for example, they're not making the steps that Honda have, and they're in the exact same bracket of concession testing. In fact, Yamaha, I could hardly say, are flatlining and Honda are rising. I think that there's a massive effort from Honda to get this right, because we're into the last year of regulations with the current bikes. Obviously, next year's not going to change too much, but you imagine Honda will throw a lot at it because they can, and potentially they could win a few more races, get on the podium more regular. Like I said, Joan Mir is kind of the cog in this, where Luca Marini was showing after the second half when they came back from the summer break that he was consistently in the top six, and he's still been there. But Mir kept crashing and crashing and crashing because he knew he had a bike under him, that he was impatient to wait for the result, Joan. I think that's why we're seeing his results come now, because he's worked out what he needs to do. And the factory team have changed they've changed everything. They've changed their approach. They're so used to winning in the past. I think now they're getting a taste for it again. And with Honda getting a taste for something, that to me just signals alarm bells for the rest. Ducati's dominance will continue. I don't know for how long, but it always will change. And when the big dog is ready, Honda will be there. I think next year, 26, who knows? 27 is what I think is the key indicator here. If they've been developing a 27 bike in the background, which you imagine they've done for maybe a year or two now, and they're getting it right, and they need to just wait until they can test it next year, who knows what Honda could do. I mean, I think, personally, I'm going to make a prediction. I think either in 27 they fight for the title or they win it. I think it's going to be that good, because it's the might of Honda, and the rider market situation is going to be so key for them. Who will they try and sign for that project? You would imagine Joan Mir, if he performs well at the end of this year and into the next year of his contract, he will stick around there at Honda potentially. But who will they sign? Will Marini get moved into LCR? Will there be a movement somewhere else? I don't know. I think it'll be a big name. I think it could be either Jorge Martin, Fabio Quartararo. I can't believe I'm actually saying this. There's a possibility, I do think it's in some world, that Marc Marquez could end up back at Honda if he feels and he gets pitched the red idea that the project's fixed and it's race winning. A lot depends on next year, of course, because if Honda might start winning a few races, would it start swaying the likes of Marc Marquez to go, hang on, if they're back winning again, what could I do on it? Honda are going to play it big for 27, and I think it's really good to see them back fighting, because we need the biggest brands at the front. Same goes for Yamaha. I hope they can get it right. But yeah, let me know what you think of Honda's progress in 2 years, essentially, from losing their main man to potentially on the wave of something pretty special heading into the next 2 years. So yeah, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, and we'll see you next time.